Hey, what is going on, guys? This is tabmok99. Welcome to the live stream. Here I am. With me is my special guest, Toshi Omagari. Toshi, welcome to the channel, and thank you for being here, my friend.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Awesome. So, I guess I really let me pull out a copy of it. I have it right here. This is the copy I have. Arcade Game Typography. It's great. I love it. I love the letter A on the front to the Z on the back.
Oh, nice.
Covers everything from A to Z. Perfect. Perfect, perfect. So I read the whole entire book cover to cover prior to having you on. And it's really a pleasure to finally talk to you. I'm really glad that you could do this.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry, my English might not be perfect.
It sounds great to me so far.
Okay, good.
When you wrote the book, I assume you wrote everything yourself, or did you have somebody like assist you with like the language and everything?
No, I wrote it myself. Of course, I had an editor, but yeah.
Well, yes.
It's kind of funny because I had a Japanese edition, which is already finished, but it's due in January. But for that one, actually, I had a Japanese translator, even though I speak Japanese. Anyway.
That's what I hear from everybody is who speaks more than one language is that if you don't use it, you lose it.
Oh no, it was just that I was too busy for translation.
Well, yeah, that too. There's that.
Yeah.
So tell me about yourself. Tell me about your career. What got you into? You're a font designer by trade. Is that right?
Exactly. So I design typefaces. That's how we call it in the trade. And well, where should I start? I originally joined art university in Tokyo and proceeded in career with this, just graphic design. Then I got interested in text and fonts and stuff. So that was more, let's say, easier to understand. It's just black and white lines and shapes and spaces. I don't have to think about layouts and stuff. So that was not really my thing, but letters were. And yeah, I started pursuing that. And then after graduation, I went to UK and did a master's course of typeface design. Then, yeah, I've been working for a company called Monotype as a typeface designer. That's been about 80 years. So yeah, that's a brief career. And I also make typefaces for retail, for people to buy, and also custom typefaces for like certain clients, certain companies, and for them to use exclusively.
Oh, okay.
For example, I designed a typeface for like H&M and companies like that.
Right, right. So for a lot of people, my target audience is typically video gamers, specifically the Mortal Kombat franchise, as I'm sure you've noticed. So there's a lot of people out there who might have questions about how the whole font thing works. A lot of people just think fonts are something free. You download on the internet, install it, and then and then you have it. But it's not quite that simple. There's a lot more to it, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's really hard to make like a cohesive collection of letters that work in any combinations because you never know as a typeface designer how the user is going to type text. So your typeface might look okay in one word, but completely disastrous in other words. But you need to make sure it looks fine in any combination. So there's a lot going on, even just for the 26 letters. And 26 letters is just English.
And that's,
there are lots
that's
of
just
other
for
languages.
capital. There's also lowercase, too, which can be completely different.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other story. And you have a bold and italic, lots of other things. So somebody made all these, and yeah, there's a whole career just designing typefaces. So yeah. Also, when it comes to licensing, as a game developer, you have to you have to make sure about the license. So you can't just download stuff and use it. That might be illegal.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Certain fonts are restricted. If you want to use it for a commercial project, you have to buy it. You have to purchase a license for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, awesome. So I first found out about this book. You've been getting a lot of good publicity. I don't know if you're aware of how effective the marketing campaign is, but let me just pull this up. The first time I heard about it was an article on Quartz called The Underappreciated Genius of Retro Video Game Fonts. And it was just pretty much all about your book. It was basically all about how you're researching for video game fonts and you're putting them all into a book together. And then I'm on Instagram and I see an ad for it. I guess this is from Read Only Memory. Put out an ad for your book, and Instagram ads are really good. They're very well marketed specifically for the person who's likely to buy it. So when I saw the ad for this book, I'm like, oh man, this is perfect. I have to get this. I knew, I think, before even the release date that this was going to be one of my must-have books. And looking through it, I mean, there's just so many cool video games in here and things like this, like fonts used in video games that I'd never even heard of, and they look amazing.
Yeah, I didn't know they were doing the Instagram ads. I bet it was really effective.
Yes. Yes, for anybody who's into video games.
I think
or... Sorry, go ahead.
There was no book like this book is the first of its kind, just talking about fonts in pixels. And I thought, I was the only one who was interested in this because there was no material references like this. So it was really nice when I started talking to people about this. There are actually lots of people who are interested in this. Oh, why was there never a book like this? So it was really nice to see many people saying, "Oh, this is perfect for me."
It is, and yeah. There's a huge interest, like way bigger than you might have thought. David Gonzalez says you were glitching out for a second, but I think I understand the gist of what you were saying. Is that when you first started this, you thought this was a personal passion project just for you, and you were surprised that so many other people are into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's true. I think there's a huge amount of interest in this. I see people in the chat. Justin McCollum is saying, "I got to get this book. It looks awesome." David Gonzalez has a question too. He wants to know, can he get this book anywhere in the world? Is this available worldwide?
I think so. It's available from a publisher called Thames and Hudson, and yeah, I see it available on Amazon. And yeah, it depends on the world, the part of the world. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'm in the U.S.
If you're in U.S., it should be fine.
I'm in the U.S., and I believe my version actually came from the U.K. I'm not sure how much sense that made to get it that way, but I thought it was awesome. I'm really happy with this particular edition. I really love it.
Yeah, the read-only memory version, that's from the UK, but we do have a cheaper paperback edition in a completely different design of the cover.
Right.
Actually, let me show you that one.
Oh, okay.
Because actually, I still don't have this limited edition. So this is how the standard edition look like.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love that too.
Yeah.
That's a paperback copy, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it's not hardbound.
Really cool.
And this typeface is from a game called Snow Brothers or Snow Bros, and it's not a famous game, but it has a really cool typeface. So yeah, we decided to use this.
So your publisher worked with you on the cover design for that one, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. What about the read-only memory? Who designed that one?
So read-only memory is run by a guy called Darren Wall, who also works for Thames and Hudson. So these two editions share the exact same contents, but I think the read-only memory got a deal from Thames and Hudson that they will be able to, publish, I think 1,000 copies.
Oh, okay. Okay, so pretty limited edition there.
Oh, yes. I don't think there will be like a second run. Well, Thames and Hudson version will be probably.
Yeah, so it's definitely something that you want to get while you still can. All right, so let me ask you this. Have you always been into video games, or is that something that just came recently?
Yeah, I grew up in Japan. I grew up with video games. I was always a Nintendo guy, so I actually haven't really played Sega stuff.
Okay.
And is my connection stable? Like, I seem to be getting a lot of glitching out comments. Anyway.
Yeah, sorry about that. But you're coming through loud
Anyway,
and clear now.
okay. So yeah, I mostly grew up with Super Nintendo. Yeah, I grew up with a bit of Nintendo as well. And actually, for the 32-bit era, I was a Sega Saturn guy. I actually haven't played any PlayStation game. So, and on the arcade side, I played a lot of mostly 90s games. And yeah, that's about it. I have never stopped playing games ever since.
That really
Although
is,
I have to say,
that really is
I'm
one
not
of my
a,
favorite eras of
I'm
gaming.
not a, oh yeah. There's one thing I have to say. I haven't really followed how can I say, Mortal Kombat. I played Mortal Kombat. I owned Mortal Kombat for Super Nintendo, but that's probably the only one that I played really, really hard.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I understand is that Mortal Kombat was never really terribly popular in Japan for whatever reason.
Uh, yeah, exactly. It wasn't really. I mean, everybody was playing Street Fighter, and if you're playing Mortal Kombat in Japan, you were weirdo. Like, what is this game?
um,
So yeah, it was the. I don't know if even if it's popular even today. We have just too many fighting games in Japan.
oh
So
yeah, Japan has so many
I
fighting
don't know.
games. There might not be room for Mortal Kombat, but I did notice in page 13 of your book you had a screenshot of Mortal Kombat. Even though it wasn't included in general in the book, you do have a one picture of it, and you explain why it's not in there. So let me ask you this: what was your decision behind restricting the content of the book to only cover monospaced fonts?
Uh, one that this is the how can I say the 8-bit 8 pixels monospace was the most popular format. So that was one format that I could find almost to university. I say almost because many of the midway games they were using proportional typefaces as well as it's probably not 8 pixels. I think the Mortal Kombat typeface was 12 pixels in height. There was a really nice tweeted thread yesterday, I think, talking about the origin of the Mortal Kombat type, and I saw the name of the typeface. I think it's called like Comic 12 or something.
Yes.
So that 12 refers to the pixel height of the typeface, so it's not 8.
I know exactly the one you're talking about. By Codeman38. This is a cool guy. He recreated the font. It was called DP Comic. His recreation of it, and that's the exact same font that was used in the first Mortal Kombat game. And yeah, the way he found out about the history of it was amazing. Let me see if I'm able to pull that up here, using my computer. Well. Yeah, here it is. Codeman38 did this whole great font. I'm actually got it on my phone right now. And it's crazy. This is the font that was used in Mortal Kombat 1, technically parts of 2. It was used in games like Crystal Caves. I've seen it all over the place. And he found out that it was from, it looks like an Alice in Wonderland game. There we go. for the Apple II. Really amazing the way he got to the bottom of it. And I see this font everywhere. I've seen it in so many arcade games, console games. Yeah, I was kind of hoping to see that one show up in your book, actually.
Well, yeah, that's simply because of the format I chose to focus. So
Fair
I'm
enough.
sorry.
No, fair enough.
Yeah,
I'm sure everybody says.
but I did.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I did research on all these arcade games, so I know exactly what kind of fonts were used. So this doesn't mean I don't know about those Mortal Kombat fonts.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the second one was designed in-house, the one for Mortal Kombat 2. If you ever write a sequel, you got to talk to John Tobias and some of the artists that work on the game and see if you can get to the bottom of that custom font they made. And was that a very common practice in your experience? Did most of the game developers create their own fonts, or were they mostly adapting already existing fonts for the games?
I think both cases. It was really hard to recreate pixel fonts. Say you have like a font reference book, which we call specimen books, and you might try pixelating those really nice typefaces like Helvetica, I don't know, Times New Roman, but it's not that easy. So it might be just easier to simply so how can I say, invented its own visual language on the format. So I think for me, it's a lot harder to actually adapt to existing typeface.
Yeah,
Like,
but you're right. We did see both
available
cases.
typeface. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite rare that I know the design of the typeface. Normally, I don't. Probably because the design of typeface weren't not important enough to be credited. And also in Japanese games, how can I say, the staff name were quite often fake, and that was because they were afraid of, employees getting hired by competitors. So that's why, for example, if you look at Nintendo, Castlevania, you have tons of names like a Bela Lugosi and that kind of stuff, which is not Bela Lugosi, but the companies were reluctant to put the actual names in the credits, so it was really hard to track.
Yeah, a lot of those developers weren't very well known. In fact, I was reading some other books recently. We've been talking a lot about different video game books on this channel and talking to the authors, and it seems like a lot of the game companies, they didn't want the developers to be known because they were worried about headhunters coming along and stealing away their talent.
Exactly. Oh, sorry, headhunting was the word I was looking for. But there's some cases that I know the design is simply because there was only one graphic artist in the team. And there was one example of, I think it was Atari's Marble Madness. And there are three typefaces. And those were the first occurrence of this, Marble Madness was the first occurrence of those three typefaces. And we know Mike Cerny did this, and Mike Cerny is now a lead architect of the PlayStation consoles. So there's one case of like a huge celebrity now who I know to have designed the typeface.
So you got a chance.
I think he also worked.
You got a chance to talk to him, right?
Oh no, I think people like Mike Cerny is really hard to get.
I see. But you did talk to a lot of developers throughout the process of writing this book, right?
Talked to the original team members of the Key Games, Atari, because I was trying to get to the bottom of the famous Atari typeface. So I talked to sorry, I forgot the name now, but there are like 4 people in Key Games, and did I actually speaking directly with Brains? Anyway, I didn't speak a lot actually to the original designers. Sorry to disappoint you about this.
Oh, that's okay. No, it's not a disappointment at all. The research process is amazing. So what exactly then, so when you were researching this book, how did you come across the bottom of some of these stuff? Because you found out a lot of cool, behind the scenes information out.
Yeah. Could you give me an example?
Yes. Okay, so
there's what kind of information?
There's a font that's used in Namco games, and then you tracked it to say, well, this exact same font was used by Atari games. And then specifically, it was used by Quiz Show. And then you said, and specifically for that, it was designed by a man named Kyle. I forget the last name now. But you really went out in detail to get all these cool stories for the book.
Yeah. Yeah, Lyle Rains.
Yeah, that's it. Lyle Rains. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just doing a tons of research on like who was in there at the time, and which company made how many games in this year, and what Namco was doing back then. They were not making games first; they were just importing games, usually from Atari. And yeah, I was not just tracking the games, but also the logistics as well.
Yeah, it was really cool to see the evolution of the font. Like you'll see, well, this font is almost exactly the same, but look how they fixed the letter X when they brought it over into this game, and look how they changed the letter Q. The Q's a hard one to get in that 8x8 square, and look how much better it looks by the time as time went on. Little details like that were just so cool to read.
Yeah, like during the research, I was just checking as many games as possible, and if there was only one pixel difference in the typeface, then I just kept it. So, sorry, there are lots of games existing typefaces or the typefaces that they had to run. So, Namco was actually reusing a lot in the 90s, the late 90s. So, actually, Namco's typography, in a sense, becomes a bit less interesting. But yeah, what was I going to say? Well, yeah, if there's one pixel difference, then I kept it in the log.
Do you think the font creators, like, if someone at Atari designed a font and then later on people at Namco are using it, do you think there was a license paid out for that, or do you think they just used it without asking, or what do you think happened there?
Uh, I don't think it was licensed. Like, I think stuff like fonts or graphical assets in general were not really big enough to be licensed. I think the game as a whole might have been licensed, or music as well.
Yeah,
But
that
the
makes
music
sense.
might be like, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Oh, I just
It was really interesting. I love the way the retro video game fonts look. I realized that the developers had to work with certain limitations. They only had so much memory, and every little byte helped, and so they tried to make that memory stretch it out as long as they could. Um, like you say in the book, technology has changed. Now they can just include a whole font on a game. They don't have any limitations. They can just kind of go crazy with it. But there is something unique about the time period before everything went HD. The way that they took some really creative approaches to make it all fit together. Um, do you have a particular favorite font out of all the ones that you've seen in the book? Is there one that really jumped out at you and says this was one of the favorite things that I saw?
yes, there's one. If you have a book, it's in page 179. So I think I can show it. This is a typeface that has like a, how do I say, copper plate scripts, only the caps, but these guys made a script typeface and using basically gray as a thin stroke. So they're trying to express, pixel thickness below 1 pixel, and by using gray, and the result is so amazing. And it almost doesn't look like monospaced, but it also appears in one of the craziest games, and it's a space sci-fi shooter, the vertical shooter, and the enemies are basically ladies in bikinis and dancers and stuff, and you basically kill those women, and for being really sexist. But it's got one of the typefaces.
That is a crazy game, and it sounds like it's an otherwise unenjoyable game, but with one of the most the best fonts that you've come across. And I agree. When you see the anti-aliasing technique and the way it looks in the game, the illusion is complete. They did a really good job with that. With the font
There are
part.
lots of games, games that were terrible but had amazing typefaces.
Yes. And sometimes
Yeah.
you see it the other way. Sometimes you see a great game, and it's like, why do they have such a blasé-looking font?
Yeah, that's the problem I had with early Nintendo games, actually, like, especially like Nintendo, like NES era of Nintendo games, like Legend of Zelda, Donkey Kong, Super Mario. They're all using the same Atari font. That I noticed. Oh, Nintendo's typography was actually not that interesting. I mean, their logo was logos were great, but not pixel typefaces.
Yeah, the in-game fonts were very plain looking. You're right. It's like they found one that kind of
Yeah,
works, and they just sort of stuck with that. All right, I've always been a fan of fonts, not almost as much as I am of video games. When I was younger, I would get collections like this. I don't know if this shows up that well on camera, but that's says 2,000 fonts. And here's another one that's actually twice as good because it's got 4,000 fonts. So I used to love stuff like that. Yeah, and then also back in the day, you probably remember this, maybe. There was a program, a word processor back in the days of DOS called WordPerfect, and you could choose between, I don't know, like Courier, Helvetica, and Times Roman. Like, this is how far back I'm going. It wasn't Courier New, it wasn't Times New Roman. This is the original Courier and the original Times Roman. And you couldn't even see what the font was on the screen. You just put it in the document, and you'd find out if it worked or not when you printed it. It would show up on paper, but it wouldn't show up on the screen. I always thought it would be great to, get more and more fonts, and obviously that day has come. Now we have unlimited amount of fonts on the computer. There's no shortage of them. And you've designed a font that made its way into MK11. In fact, at the bottom, there's a link to buy your book on Amazon, and I put that link in your font in Albertus Nova. This is a better looking version of that. You just came out with this like 2 years ago, this font, right?
Yes, it did. Yeah, this typeface is a revival of a famous typeface called Albertus. It was originally designed in the 1930s, and for some reason it appeared a lot in movies. Like John Carpenter was a big fan of this typeface, and it appeared in Escape from New York, They Live, and Big Trouble in Little China, and movies, films like that. It also appeared in Dune. So yeah, it was popular, but it was not as good as people remembered. So I wanted to have more weight and more language support, especially if you're going to sell this to gaming companies. They're going to need Russian. So I added Russian support in this typeface.
Oh, good. Yes, the comrades over there in Russia will need that support. Yeah, I like it. And the fact that was used in Big Trouble in Little China, that's amazing because, as you might be aware, that was one of the movies that inspired Mortal Kombat. So that's awesome. And they used that font in Mortal Kombat 11. So amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. We got a question.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, it's right in what, isn't it? It's or just every. Was that film? Actually, I don't know much about that connection, but yeah. There are similar characters.
There are, and the main one that people will remember is the Three Storms. One of them, the hats basically inspired the Raiden hat for the first game. Also, not a lot of people know this, but one of the developers just told me the other day. I was hanging out with Daniel Pacina. He was here in South Florida, and he told me that Melina's fatality from Mortal Kombat 2, where she takes off her mask and there's a bunch of teeth, that was actually inspired by a monster that shows up near the end of Big Trouble in Little China. So, the references are they never end.
All right.
All right. So
yeah, I don't know why they chose this typeface. I mean, I was really happy to discover it, but there was not necessarily communication between the developer and me. They just licensed the font that I discovered later. It's like, oh, it's my typeface.
You have no idea until after it happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have any other stories like that where your fonts or your typefaces just kind of showed up somewhere?
Let me think. No, Albertus Nova might be the first one I know. I mean, we sometimes make custom typefaces for. We as a Monotype make custom typefaces for video game companies, but I was never involved in that. I really wanted to, but this is the first instance of my typeface in a video game. So Yeah,
Well,
I don't have any other example.
no, that's okay. That's got to be great though, just to see something
Yeah.
like that, and obviously that will happen again. Um,
Oh yeah.
one of the things I've been meaning to ask this question for like 10 minutes now. David Gonzalez asked a while back, how much time did you spend researching this book? How long did the process take?
It's equivalent of doing a postgraduate, getting PhD. I was actually thinking of doing a PhD first, like spending 2 3 years, which I ended up spending anyway. And yeah, 2 to 3 years, giving up all of the nights and weekends. So yeah, I was really glad that I didn't have a girlfriend. I do now, but yeah, I wouldn't have worked otherwise. Yeah,
Oh yeah, you would have totally ignored her
yeah,
to make the book the best it could be. That's a sacrifice. Yeah, people don't realize how much time and effort goes into something like this. But you're right. You basically give up any semblance of a social life in order to get the research done.
yeah. Writing a book shouldn't be this hard, but yeah, my particular topic was.
Yeah, right, right. Sometimes they do. So out of
Is there any other
everything that you've,
question?
out of all the stuff that you've done, all the research, all the games that you've been playing, all the countless hours, what was the most exciting discovery that you made?
Hmm. Oh, that's a difficult question.
I
Uh,
know.
um,
Hard to choose just
I
one.
think, uh, yeah, it depends on the topic. Okay, I can give you one example. I, one of the big thing about pixel fonts in video games is that you can use colors, changes everything. And I wanted to know where it started, because if you think about PC games, you don't, not PC games, but if you think about general use, you don't really need multiple colors if you think about word processor. So it should have a start in entertainment, video games. And I was really glad to discover the first color typeface. I mean, color typeface nowadays is becoming huge thanks to Apple's emojis, but game industry has been doing it from 1982 precisely. So I was really glad to discover that.
Yeah, yeah, that is a big one. Um, is there anything that you've learned that you thought was really cool, but it just didn't quite fit in the book and you had to leave it out?
Um, hmm. For the stuff I had to leave out, actually, uh, there's the two companies I really wanted to include in the books, and they are missing because they didn't approve. They didn't. Yeah. I asked every company for the use of the fonts, and do you notice there are two companies missing?
Who's missing?
Capcom and SNK.
Oh, oh man, some of the best fighting game companies.
Oh yeah, I know. They got so many good typefaces. I really wanted to have them, but maybe for the next edition.
Right, that's what I wanted to ask you about was a sequel. Um, you were this
Yeah.
one you restricted yourself. You cut yourself down to just arcade game fonts that fit the monospace format with the 8x8 grid. But there's so many great fonts that came out on video game consoles. You know, there's so many good fonts that didn't fit the monospace font. Um, would you be willing to go through it all over again and make a sequel?
Yeah, in the future that would be amazing. Yeah, because I don't want, like, despite this title of the book, I don't want the 8 pixels monospace to, you know, be considered. That's the whole picture. But we had like 16 by 16 pixels or proportional typefaces and title logos, for God's sake. there's so many other aspects of game typography that I could discuss.
Yes,
So,
there's like the art on even the
yeah,
side cabinets, the art that you only see, the artwork on the side of the arcade machines or on the box art and the instruction manual and logos.
yeah, I think those things like logos, title screens, and cabinet arts, they might have been better covered. I don't know. I get the feeling that those might already exist in the form of books. Have you come
Well,
across anything like that?
yeah. As far as I know, there isn't. As far as I know, nobody's
Oh,
covered
okay.
it. You're the video game font guy. If there's going to be somebody that gets into that, I think it's going to be you.
Well, I'm engaged now. I don't know.
I know it's a lot of work, so I'm hoping that everybody who's watching this video will go and pick up a copy and support it. That's obviously the best way to get a sequel is to show that there's demand for the book.
Totally.
Um,
There was another interesting thing I learned from this book. I quite often talk about the text sizes in video games. Nowadays, you have HD screens and you can make very small text sizes, and people complain that you can't read that small.
that's true.
And one of the interesting things about this 8 pixels format is that you might consider it a bit too small, but uh, the the pixel resolution didn't change all that much. Usually around 250 pixels in height. Also, more crucially, the CRT display used for arcade games also didn't change much. It was almost always 19 inches minimum. Sometimes you might see 17 inches, but below 17, the cabinet would probably not look appealing in the arcade. So I think there was like a minimal standard, like either 17 or 19, which automatically made 8 pixels about like 28 points, 30 points. So that's quite large, actually. It's always legible. So it was as if this other requirements guaranteed legibility of the text size.
You're right. I've never heard anybody play a video game and say they couldn't read the font. That didn't happen until everything went HD. And you're right. Now now the fonts it's high definition and it's crisper, but they don't think that means they should have larger fonts when they probably should.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big problems in Google Stadia. You can play that thing on smartphone. You can play Red Dead Redemption 2 on smartphone. Like, I don't want to read the text in smartphone like this. Like, that's for me the big concern than latency.
Yeah, depending on how bad the latency is, because I've seen it make people lose games before, where they'll sit there, they'll press a button, they'll put the controller down, and then the guy will move. Um, if you're playing to win and you lose because of that, that would ruin the fun. But you're right about the typeface too. They should probably hire somebody as a typeface consultant to make sure that they're doing everything the right way, because I think sometimes those guys, they put the fonts last. They don't really think about it until after the fact.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, there are lots of people who can't read that small size. That's another issue because the gamers and not just gamers, but gamers are getting old as well. But game designers, creative people are usually younger than the general public, so they're almost always too young to notice that kind of problem.
That makes sense too. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. But I will say this: there are a lot of young people, if they're in the gaming community, who have bad vision. I certainly was one of them as a kid.
Yeah, usually I think people with bad visions, they tend not to become a designer or graphic artist.
That's probably a
So I think,
good policy. Yeah.
yeah, designers and artists are by nature better with better eyesight than general public.
Yeah, that makes total sense. They're more sensitive to slight variations in color. They're more attuned with things like that. They'll know what looks good and what doesn't, what clashes. Oh yeah, all very important things that you need to have as a designer. One thing I found fascinating in your book, and I don't want to give the whole thing away. I don't want to give out all details, but one thing I loved was the way you explained the challenges of the video game developers in the 80s and the 90s, which is that they did not come from a font designing background. They had to figure out how to develop a typeface. They had to make it up as they went along. That wasn't really their skill set. That wasn't their training. They don't really have an eye for that kind of thing. And they made it work. And, you know, with varying degrees of success, obviously, some of them did really, really well. And there are some that I think are just great fonts in general. Hey, what's going on, Fatal Kate? How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I think the lack of classical training actually worked in their favor because they didn't know the history of the typefaces and they could just do whatever they pleased. And there are lots of solutions that traditionally trained typeface designers might not come up with. And I see it's like, oh, I never thought about this, but this is fantastic. You know, I really enjoyed discoveries like that.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned all kinds of interesting stuff in the book. Like another challenge that I remember reading was that a lot of the developers and the programmers were Japanese, and so maybe some of them weren't too familiar with the characters that we see in our alphabet, the Latin alphabet. They don't speak English as a first language, so they might not really be too familiar with the letters. So problems like with G and Q, they might not really be sensitive to those kinds of issues. And yet they still seem to make it work. Like all those fonts still came out great.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are like typefaces with flipped capital J like 2 or 3 times. So like the direction of J and the Z were actually, quite commonly mistaken.
Yes, I could imagine. Even sometimes now when you have a font like a sans serif font, it's sometimes hard to tell the difference between a capital I and a lowercase l. That's an issue. All right, so just showing off some of the book here. I love when you show, the fonts from a bunch of different games side by side. Sometimes you'll then show some really big letters. You'll just zoom in on like 1 or 2 characters there, or you'll have like a nice little spread like this for certain games. How did you make the decision when that would be warranted for a certain font, or when a certain game should get a big spread like that?
That has to do with a lot of things. We really wanted to have, how can I say, the spreads that break the rhythm, because I didn't want the book to be monotonous, like just showing, like a spreadsheet. I wanted to, just show just one glyph, and the decision to lay out all these things, it was really dependent on like what other games were on the page, or how much comment I wrote. Or it's there was no like one answer to that.
No, but I see. You were thinking about many different factors during the whole thing. Yeah.
I also have to think, this game, for example, Gradius had one big feature already, then I don't want to repeat that. There are lots of factors that go into that decision.
Well, yeah, and that would be a risk that you would run, is it might start to feel repetitive after a while, but I'm telling you, it doesn't. Every page just feels fresh. It just, and you break it up sometimes, especially when you introduce a new chapter. I love the chapter on the MICR fonts, the ones that look like the bottom of a check, for example, the futuristic fonts that we would see in games like Tron, stuff like that. Like it's always like, I never thought about that as a font category or as a typeface category. But when I see them all like side by side, it's incredible.
Yeah, that one is never a category, even in our professional. I think it's a part of like display, or just, I don't know, interesting, just whatever category basically. But in video games, that's its own category, and there are so many typefaces. And usually you might think of using that kind of typeface for like sci-fi and shooting, that kind of stuff, but it was also used in like soccer and baseball games as well. So it did appear in all kinds of video games. even immersion or like table, playing cards and that kind of games as well.
Right, right. Um, I just went to a gaming convention this past weekend, and I saw a lot of different arcade games that I'd never seen before. And thanks to your book, I was definitely sensitive to the choices that they made when it comes to the typeface. I was looking out for the different fonts and the lettering that the games would use. Somebody asked this in the chat earlier, and I wanted to circle back to this. Do you ever go to the gaming conventions, and do you ever do appearances like that?
I live in London, and I know there's like MCM Comic Con. I've been to Comic Con before, but the London one is quite commercial. It's basically, a place where you see a whole bunch of traders and announcements. So I don't think I've ever been to any of those. I really want to though.
I was actually in London.
So I don't know yeah. Oh, were you? Okay.
In the beginning of the year, I was in London for the Mortal Kombat 11 event that Warner Brothers had, and I'm sure that if you had known about them and what they were doing with your font, it would have been a good idea for them to bring you there so you could check it out.
Oh yeah, but I don't know. I'm just one person. How can I say? I just made a graphical asset for them. So
I get
would you
it.
even invite a person who made a rock texture to the event? I don't know.
Well, I think that what you did is very important. I think they have I know what you're saying, but don't undersell yourself. I think it was a cool contribution, and I certainly think there's interest in your book, and I think there's interest from a certain segment of the community that would love the chance to meet you. If you ever go to Chicago by Galloping Ghost Arcade, you should talk to the owner. His name's Doc Mack. I'm sure he would definitely have like a book signing event for you there where you could talk to all the gamers. He has one of the largest arcades in the world, if not the largest.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that sounds amazing.
I'm sure you've been to places like that for doing research, for finding out game titles and paying attention to the fonts on the screen and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so did you ever have a chance... Well, I guess I was going to ask you about some of the cutting room floor stuff. Some of like you mentioned like, hey, here's the font that the game uses, and then here's some letters that actually don't appear in the game. I thought that was so cool how you're able to find that stuff out. And I guess I've seen websites like that too, like the cutting room floor website where they show unused graphics and stuff like that. That's something that a lot of people would overlook. A lot of authors might overlook that, and I really appreciate the fact that you went so far as to get that stuff and throw it into the book also.
Yeah, that was a bit difficult. Of course, difficult to find first because when I did find those typefaces, for example, I asked Taito if I could use these typefaces, and Taito would say, I mean, this typeface was not used. Like, we're not sure, And I was like, I just wanted to see how cool it is. I managed to convince them. So, but yeah, even conversation with gaming companies are sometimes really straightforward.
That's the stuff I'm talking about. I love hearing the stories that you did behind the scenes to get the use of these fonts and to make it happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned that you had difficulty with SNK and Capcom, and that maybe you could circle back to them again in a sequel, but I guess some companies are just protective. They're overprotective maybe about their assets,
Yeah, Capcom SNK, they're really, how can I say, difficult to work with. So I don't think there are many like fan books with it on. I'm not sure. I hear there's one guy trying to write Biohazard. Not Biohazard. What was it? Resident Evil book. And I hear that project is also a little difficult.
Yeah.
Because of the Capcom. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just reading.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I think the problem with these two companies, not necessarily those companies, but they probably didn't understand, like I said, no a book like this before, so they didn't quite understand the concept of the book.
That's exactly what I was thinking. There is no book like this. There's nothing to really compare it to, so they might have felt a bit apprehensive about just handing over assets, including cutting room floor stuff, over to you. Maybe now that this book is out, maybe they would be more willing in the future to do something with you. So, what do you think is more likely? Do you think you'll make an updated version of this book? Do we know where maybe you just add a few more things to it, like some bonus content? Or do you think you would just do a whole new book, like a sequel?
That's hard to say. I think this topic is a bit too big for one person to cover. So I just want to say to the world, hey, this is a really interesting area. I'm the first to explore, but I want other guys to explore too. So I want this book to be work like an invitation. So I don't necessarily need to own the topic.
Right, right. That makes sense too. Well, I mean, you were talking in the beginning. You were talking in the beginning about that tweet that really blew up by Codeman38. He seems like maybe a guy who would be qualified to, I don't know, work with as a co-author maybe at some point in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
I know for a fact that he is aware of your book and that he said he bought it on day one. But it's funny because his whole thread sort of turned into an ad for your book. Like everybody who's posting who didn't read all the replies says, "Hey, you got to go check this book out, Arcade Game Typography." Like everybody's just sort of hitting them over the head, telling them to buy your book.
Well, yeah, that's how comments work.
Yep, social media is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I would
there's
love that.
one thing I wanted to talk about. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying I would love that to see this project, this passion project of yours, continue.
Oh yeah. There's one thing I wanted to talk about Capcom because there's at least one Street Fighter typeface that I won't cover, but like I said, Capcom didn't allow. But there's a typeface that showed up in which page was it? 114. This Blue Hawk. So this typeface showed up in Korean arcade game, which copied the Street Fighter 2 typeface almost wholesale. So I couldn't approve, so I basically put that. This is a company that stole Capcom's design, so that's how I circumvent the issue, at least for one typeface.
That was a good workaround. Because, you're not including fonts from a Capcom game. You're including a font from another game that just happened to steal from Capcom, essentially.
Yeah. Oh, and there's one more. 122. There's a typeface called, from a game called Gumbo. I think this one is using, is it Captain Commando? I think also from Strider.
Okay, yeah.
I think it's the same typeface. Yeah.
Yep, I see it. You're talking about this blue and purple one at the bottom of 122.
Yeah, I think Captain Commando and Strider, at least Captain Commando, they're using basically a single color, two color version of it. No gradients, no gradation. So again, this is close enough,
Yeah, absolutely.
But using it as a substitute for Capcom, yeah.
No, that was a good way to get some Capcom fonts in there. But you're right. It is a huge topic. Even with all those restrictions, you still put together quite a big book. Somebody was asking how many pages it is. Let me look. It's 272 pages. And that's, I mean, obviously, if you were to cover games from Nintendo, games from Sega, Atari, all the home consoles, like even the computers like Amstrad and Commodore 64, Amiga, you could have over 1,000 pages of the book. I mean, that just seems like
even in arcades alone, Yeah, even in arcades alone, this could be like 2,000 or 3,000 pages because this book contains probably about like 10-20% of what I really have.
Wow. Wow. How
Yeah.
many games did you play? I thought I remember reading 7,000, but I'm not sure if that's accurate.
Well, I didn't necessarily play, but 7,000 sounds about right. Yeah.
Oh man. And how many games are included? About 10, 20% of that?
Uh, I think so, or maybe it sounds, yeah, I think less than. I don't know. I haven't counted.
Yeah, that, I know. What's the point of counting them all? But it would be interesting to know, I guess. Oh man, I can't wait to see what else you come up with.
Yeah.
Um, is there? All right, so forget fonts for a minute. What is your favorite video game in general?
Oh, when I was a child, like 10 years old or something like that, I used to play Contra 3 all the time.
Oh yeah.
So Contra 3 was my favorite. Or in Japan, it's called Contra Split. And I then afterwards it was Mario Kart, Golden Knight, Smash Bros, and uh, I really like Splinter Cell. I was a really big Xbox guy, so it's really hard to say which is my favorite. Uh, Actually, I'm not a big fighting game fan in general, so I know I evolution of fighting games, but I've never really good at it. So yeah,
That's okay. To each their own.
one, yeah,
But I see people in the comments like they get it. They're saying Contra was great. So I think they understand. Like everybody has different tastes, and there's other games out there besides Mortal Kombat that the audience does like to play and enjoy.
yeah. It's really interesting because I played Contra 3, then I almost always remember how the typeface looked like, which is like a really thin, like a kind of Roman-looking typeface, probably with gradation. So yeah, I discovered later when went back to the all these retro games that I did remember all these fonts. For the games I used to play when I was like 10, 20. 10,
Uh-oh, I think the audio just cut out. When you were
oh,
10, 20?
oh, yeah, no, 12. I'm sorry.
Oh, yes. Okay, that makes sense.
Oh, there
All
was
right,
one mention
so
of Soul Calibur. That's interesting.
yeah, I saw
Uh,
that too.
I just briefly wanted to talk about, yeah, uh, interesting thing about Mortal Kombat, going back to this, is that the Mortal Kombat always has the same logo. There's been some updates in details of the design, but they have been super consistent. Soul Calibur is probably the least serious to the design of the title logo. Street is more the same. Tekken is not really consistent either, but I always liked how consistent when it comes to branding of Mortal Kombat. They really stuck with the original design.
That's true. That's true. One thing that you'll see in the Mortal Kombat community, there are people who love review BT, or just review, I guess we can call it. You mentioned in your book, you've shown a couple different arcade games that have their own adaptation of review, but Mortal Kombat 3 used it a lot. They used it for a lot of the menus, all the wins, fatality, fight. They use that text a lot. And there's even an account out there called Mortal Kombat 3 font or MK3 font. You can search it up and you'll just see examples of review that they see in everyday life because it reminds them of MK3.
Yeah, that's a really weird one. I really like review, but from a different game. That was Final Fight 2. I think
Yes.
Final Fight 1 was also using review. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think Afterburner and maybe a
So
few
I don't know if
others.
that was a Afterburner. Yes, used it in the logo. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if you play enough games, you'll start seeing that font everywhere. Um, is Okay, so aside from the Namco font, or the Quiz Show font, I guess we should call it, which was kind of everywhere, are there any other fonts that you could think of that sort of became iconic because you started seeing them all over the place?
Ooh, ooh. Well, that's a tough one. I think it really was just Namco. Sorry, same mistake. The quiz show fonts. Probably that's probably the only typeface that anybody think of as a video game font. So is there another typeface like that? I can't think of anything on top of my head.
Yeah, I can't either. Um, yeah, but that one really stuck out because it was just so all over the place. Midway was really good at reusing a lot of their fonts too. Like there's this font in the audit screen of Midway games. You'll see it used in the 80s and 90s. They use it in Terminator. They use it in NBA Jam. They use it in Mortal Kombat. They use it on Smash TV. Like when you first turn the screen on, you go through the audit screen. You'll just see that same font everywhere. So much so that even on some of the home consoles, this is really rare, but you'll see that home consoles use the exact same font for Mortal Kombat Trilogy with no changes in size or anything.
Really, that like big blocky sans serif design? I think
Um, I have an example of it.
I don't
Let
quite
me,
remember.
yeah. Well, you know what? Let me see if I can find a Midway audit screen real quick, and I'll bring it up into YouTube. Think I would have come.
I think I know the design. I'm not sure anyway.
Yeah, it's. I'm getting something ready for this right now. It takes a second to pull it up here, but when I do, it'll be worth it. Okay, right now we're just going to see a black screen, but the picture is coming, guys. Bam. I'm going to blow it up, though.
It's a little small for my screen.
Sorry, yeah, it takes a second. It's on a delay.
Oh yes, yeah, yes. This typeface. Yes, I know.
Yeah, so that's the one that
Yeah, it looks
Midway
like
used
again.
in so many of their games. This particular example is from Mortal Kombat 2, which you can kind of tell from at the top where it says game audits. But
Yeah, I think it looks like a 12 pixels font, and yeah, it looks like a proportional space. So
yep,
yeah, Midway developed like a proportional typesetting system already. So as well as Williams, they
yes.
had to
Well, then they did
they had to
merge
be
to
excluded
become one
from my
company.
book. Yeah.
And you know, in general, when those games were released from the arcades to the home systems, they kind of had to downsize everything, including the fonts. So when you show a font in your
Yeah.
book and you show like this was the font that they used for Street Fighter, you know, this is the same font that Street Fighter would use. This is the same font that Afterburner would use. If you played it on a Sega Mega Drive or Genesis, or if you played it on an NES, we didn't quite get the exact same font. They downscaled it a bit, you know.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I chose arcade, because arcade used to be the cutting edge all the time. So there was almost no point in visiting the home. I mean, there are lots of really nice typefaces, home console exclusives like Sonic the Hedgehog, whatever. But for the majority of the good typefaces were in arcades.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So basically, I was always able to see the latest trends so long as I followed arcades. Didn't do home consoles.
Yeah, the arcades had the. I guess the arcade fonts were bigger and better, and but for the exclusive home releases, I'll tell you one of my favorite fonts on the Sega, the 16-bit Sega system, was the one that they released for Comic Zone. If you've ever played Comic Zone,
Oh, yes. Yep, yep.
That font was so perfect for looking like it was an actual comic book.
Uh, at least I remember how I played. I don't know if I had some friendship. Just, was it Genesis?
Yes. Yes, and some of the people are saying, Dave Gorman says, "Oh yeah, I played Comic Zone. It was very hard." That's true. I remember playing it
Oh,
with my
yes. Yeah.
friends too,
Yeah.
and we got to the ending. Um, and no, we're not going to be talking about Comic Sans on this stream. That is a banned word, actually. We cannot say Comic Sans. That we don't talk about that here. We don't
Oh,
like it.
how come?
Oh, there's actually an
I
entire
mean,
book
I made
written.
a typeface.
There's an entire book written about how bad Comic Sans is.
Go ahead. Okay.
I just,
But there are lots of positive circumstances, actually. Some people find it much easier to read, especially dyslexic people. I shouldn't generalize them, but there are lots of people with re- which who prefer Comic Sans. And I actually have made a typeface called the Comic Code, which is basically a monospace adaptation of Comic Sans. I program in Python, and my typeface is this monospace Comic Sans like really well.
oh,
So yeah, I'm open. It's like I like Comic Sans.
okay. Look at that. That's awesome. I didn't realize that it's easier for people with learning disabilities to process Comic Sans. That's a good point. And I just looked up the font you told me about,
Yeah.
Comic Code. That was yours.
Yes. Yeah. Because for me, a native programmer would like I program not really good at it, so I can get easily bored, and I have monotone looking typeface, so I want some thing. So yeah,
Yeah, I get it. So it's a very good thing to have a monospaced version of that. I guess. Yeah, I can see the benefits of that.
yeah.
Okay,
But
awesome.
yeah, going back to Comic Con, yeah, this was great. I think this comics might have been, I'm not quite sure how it works internally, but it might have been actually, it's just baked graphics, not necessarily typeface or fonts.
Mm-hmm.
They understand the distinction.
Yeah, a font includes everything: the typeface, the
Baked,
size, the bold, italic, all that stuff.
yeah. And when I say graphics, then that means it's just one graphic asset. And if you call it a font, then it has to be decomposable into the letter units. And Comic Zone, actually, I'm not sure. This one is a bit too tricky to actually use it for technical reason. I don't know. They might have done it.
Okay. I guess I just have one last question for you. What have you learned any new information since after your book was written? Like sometimes you'll write a book, you'll put it out there, and then new information will just kind of be given to you. What have you learned anything new like that?
Yeah. The famous Atari typeface. I couldn't really track down the original designer of the typeface. I interviewed people, but after I was done with the text, I was told that this certain guy, my Reigns, designed the typeface. Definitely, we couldn't conclude the book, but yeah, there's one, and there was also a mention of not mention. Hold on a sec. There was one typeface that was quite popular on Atari ST, and I didn't know really about page 111, there's a typeface from Atari ST, but I was not really familiar with old PC typefaces, so I just put it in general description of the typeface. So, but there are people saying, "Oh, this is from this computer,"
Okay,
So yeah,
I got it. This is Quizmaster. Is that the game that we used it?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that does sort of look like a computer font. Like even when you're looking at that seems unusual for an arcade game. When you look at it, it seems like you're looking at a home computer.
Yeah, this typeface appears a lot especially in these kind of like a pub quiz games.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something that came from a computer.
Okay, great. Well, I guess that is about all the time we have for today. I really wanted to thank you for your time. It's an excellent book. It was really enjoyable to talk to you and to learn more about what went into it. Do you have anything else that you want to share with us?
Hmm.
Where should people find you, or where can people go to buy your fonts?
Oh, okay. Well, search for Tabular Type Foundry. That's where I release the comic code typeface. And also, I'm available on Twitter as Toshi _ E. I have also a Japanese Twitter account, and yeah, I'm on Instagram as well.
Okay,
So
awesome.
yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah.
Okay, well, here is a link to the Twitter. Let me see what I can find out about Tabular Type Foundry. So we've got 5 font families here. I see Comic Code. Oh, I see a really good one. Belinsky, Tabular Script, Comic Code Ligatures. A lot of great typefaces. So I'm going to link to your Twitter in the chat. I'll link to the Tabular Type Foundry there in the chat as well. So everybody check out what Toshi Omagari has. Oh, you know what? Let me do the Instagram one too. That's good. Everybody needs to build up their Instagram for sure. How do I spell your Instagram name?
The same, Toshi Omagari. Oh, wait. Toshi Omagari? Actually, OAG. Whatever. No, it's just at Toshi Omagari, one word.
Got it. All right, so let me pull that up. Toshi Omagari. Instagram. One word. And here's that. So everybody who's interested in video game fonts, and even if you're just interested in fonts in general, like I am, go ahead and follow Toshi Omagari at the links that I gave in the chat. There's his Twitter, there's his Instagram, and there's his page on Tabular Type Foundry on My Fonts. So check it out, ladies and gentlemen. This has been tabmok99 with Toshi Omagari. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time. Sayonara.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.